Hey, team players, and welcome back to Local Football Flavor. Bob, I got to tell you up front, I am just so excited that we are able to give people winners week in and week out. Last week, getting 3 wins to 1 loss, just an absolutely great position, knowing that we're making people money out there. We're getting people into their league playoffs on the fantasy football side and making stuff happen. And Bob, one thing we didn't talk about that I'm going to be doing in the off season that I want to make a thing moving forward here is that we are going to do the same way that we break down for betting for over unders, how much is each team going to score here and there. But what we're going to do is, since we use the matrix method of looking across the entire league, and by the way, I just kind of made up that term because it sounded cool in my head.
That just, I don't know if that's a matrix.
But regardless, that's how we go about our bets. There is just like the Pokemon with all their 400 different ways of having their rock, paper, scissors, fire loses the water, but fire beats grass. Mm-hmm. We basically look at that through NFL teams. The transitive property of the NFL and by how strongly they're supposed to beat them based upon future spreads and actual outcomes, right? So what we're going to do next year, and I think that this will really help us on the fantasy side, is I'm going to isolate teams on their schedules based upon total projected points for during the 3-week window of the playoffs, the 3-week window leading into the playoffs, and see if there's also going to be gaps in individual team schedules where their schedule is going to be like a roller coaster where it looks like it's going to go up and down. Because every team, there's always a couple teams every year that has a good peak or a good valley. So we can easily identify these are going to be teams, and this is going to be your target trade week. Because we can do it once the season starts really easily.
I mean, when you say that, there's a lot of data out there already, but it's something interesting that I saw on TikTok recently is that there is a way to look at the schedule, like you were saying, where right now it says like Atlanta, is like a number 1 run defense or something like that on ESPN. When you put it in your fantasy rankings, you look at the matchup and you're like, oh, they're number 1 rated run defense. But in recent weeks, they haven't been. Mm-mm. So there is something to say off the, and also the running backs that they face over a period of time might be weaker or stronger, which will affect their overall ranking in the standings too. So like you look at a team like Cincinnati, where, they were facing a lot of pass heavy teams for a while. Then they were facing some teams with some really good, strong run games. And those games were like super competitive, right? Mm-hmm. Then you look at the Broncos, and the Broncos were rated as one of the worst run defenses at the beginning of the year because of that game against Miami. Mm-hmm. But then over the last several games, they're actually a really good team. And, but the rankings on ESPN at least don't take into account when you look on the side. And it doesn't also take into account, whether a running back is good at catching out of the backfield or whether he's going to get his points through the ground. And a lot of times when you're looking at those matchups, you have to make sure that you consider the coverages that are there. That's why we always look at the wide receiver and cornerback matchups. Mm-hmm. And usually projected wise, you can get it decently well. Now there's other teams, and sometimes it just, blows up like Deebo Samuel did the last couple of weeks. And at the beginning of the season, we were not on board with Deebo because he just wasn't getting the play last year. But you could easily see that as the season went on, that Deebo was definitely an integral part of that offense. And, trading for him in the early part of the season probably would have been a really good beneficial thing. Even though he wasn't scoring at this clip, he was still scoring at a pretty decent pace because he can do so much against teams and he goes against their weakest point. And so looking at it and looking at players in that way too, I think is going to be something that to look for,
You actually just broke down one of the most important things with statistics overall, especially when we look at cumulative statistics, which is what the NFL season is. Because in week 1, you only have 1 data point. Week 2, you have 2 games, so on and so forth as the thing goes on, which means by nature, anyone who's doing a ranking system overvalues the past versus the future. So if I have a really good month of September, it can take a while for my value to actually show where I really am. Mm-hmm. Denver's defense was a good example of that. In reality, are they really the 15th worst defense if we look at the last 4 games? Hell no. But if you look at them overall, that's the ballpark they're in.
Mm-hmm.
So this is part of why we do it with the matrix method. I'm patenting this now, Bob. I'm just going all the way.
Not
I'm
a matrix, though.
But it is a matrix because it's looking at every single data point between all of the teams and it does factor in who you've played as an inherent result. So this is why we're going to be able to say pre-draft, players from, obviously schedule's not out, but players from this team are going to have a really strong start. You're going to want to sell them by week 5,
and that's usually
maximize your returns.
And that's usually what and going into the season, and this for anybody that's bought a fantasy football magazine or anything like that, goes on ESPN. That's kind of what you think about and what you figure out, where you look at the schedule. And I did it this year in our league. Although I missed the playoffs, but I had the most points in the league. This is a testament to that theory, is that you go ahead and you say, okay, at the beginning of the season, I had Patrick Mahomes, Trevor Lawrence, and CJ Stroud and Kyler Murray on my team. You come in and you say, okay, which one of these guys could I trade because I'm suffering now because I don't have X player. But over the next several weeks, these players have a really good schedule or a softer schedule. So you go out there and, A-Chain's hurt. So you go and you trade A-Chain at a lower value to get somebody who's going to play at a higher pace, but could come back to a higher team. This is what we talk about every week. But going out and getting a guy like Dak at his lowest point after that Giants week and after a couple of those bad weeks, now he's elite. He's a top elite option. We talked about Dak before the season started and expressed and said, although traditional rankings are going to have Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and we like those guys too, we like Dak as well because Dak is a player on an explosive team. It's one of the reasons we also like CeeDee Lamb going into this season. And it's another reason why, just for brutal honesty, I started Diggs this past week. He got 6 points. This is what we talked about going into the season, where we said guys like Diggs, their value is going to be at their highest from week 1 to week 12. After that cold sets in, after the team starts to do different things, these cold weather teams are affected in different ways. So you want to try to have dome teams. You want to try to have warm weather teams. And it's not always a tried and true method, but more often than not, this is true. But when you come down to it and you're like, oh man, should I play Diggs and Ayuk on paper or Diggs in London on paper? You're like Diggs by a mile, even though the matchup's bad, his talent is better. But this is something you need to look out for when you make trades, because it definitely does affect it. And a website that's good for this, Joe, for anybody listening right now, is teamrankings.com.
Oh, they're amazing. Yeah.
Teamrankings.com. And, it sorts everything by offensive stats by quarter, defensive stats by quarter, all that good stuff. And one of the things that it does, and one of the things that I think is really interesting for you to take a look at, and just as an example,
is the last 3 game, the last 5 game charts.
Yeah, the opponent's rushing attempts per game. So it goes last 3, last 1, and home and away, because the splits between home and away can definitely fluctuate. Like, for example, Philadelphia at home lets up more rushing attempts than they do on the road. They're still one of the better teams, but they let up more. A team like the Jets at home only let up 28.8. On the road, 37.6. So that's just another stat to add into the fire, because they're averaging over their last 3 games 30 rushes per game. And you look at the teams just as an example here, you look at the teams that the New York Jets have played over the last several weeks. And granted, these have been pretty bad weather games for the Jets. And you look at it, I'm just pulling up their schedule real quick. You have the Falcons, who didn't have as many, but they didn't have as many Bijan rushing attempts in that game.
Yeah.
The Dolphins, who have basically 3 running backs, and the Bills, who ran Josh Allen and James Cook, right? So you look at it and you go, oh, okay, well, and why I bring this up is that stat can't be taken just at face value. You have to think of who's getting the carries, who's getting that action, because on a team like the Falcons, you would say, oh, Bijan's a great play. And he was. but he wasn't at the same time because of the way that Arthur Smith uses that team.
Yeah, it kind of goes for the general theory of being, if your team's losing and your team's going to lose the game, in general, your receivers should put up more numbers versus if your team's winning, because garbage time goes, if you're losing, to the receivers, and if you're winning, to the running backs. That's just the general rule. So when you look and say there's games that you're going to lose by 6 or more, really, there's a higher propensity of garbage time than a 2-point spread, just as an example there. So when you look at those and go, what side is your players going to be on? It's just a better way of projecting. And like I said, with this being the first year we've truly introduced the matrix and made it work, I'm very excited for the possibilities to go with moving forward from there. And with that being said, one of the great things that it's giving us the whole year is power rankings and what the considered final wins are going to be. And I wanted to take a look at some of the teams that have underperformed and overperformed based upon what the market thought in the preseason.
Hey, Dylan, congrats. Let's pull Dylan up here.
Oh, I missed Dylan's question here. Sorry about that.
Made the playoffs. Congratulations, Dylan.
Awesome.
That always feels good. Tough opponent this week, though. Need the potential boom week on a few of these guys. Got a bunch of start questions, pre-warning, and if that's
shoot them away, baby. Shoot them away.
We're gonna talk a little bit about some power rankings that Joe's data has gone out for us in terms of teams. Feel free to leave your questions in the chat, and we will answer them as you.
Yeah, we'll hit them as you shoot them. Yeah. So probably the easiest way to do this, Dylan, is give us your roster, man. Give us who you need to start. Obviously, PPR or not, and we'll go out about the best roster available. So as you're getting that typed in here, Dylan, we greatly appreciate it. I want to bring up the conversation we were having throughout the year, really, about teams that were overperforming and underperforming versus what the market said they should have been. And by market, this is people actually betting. This isn't people on hot takes saying you should do this that have no actual skin in the game. This is money on the table. Where are they saying you should be?
Okay.
And obviously preseason, there's no injuries yet. But Bob, do you have a guess as far as the most disappointing team from what the money on the table was preseason to actual outcome is?
Oh, I've got to guess one of those teams has got to be the Jets.
The New York Football Jets were projected to put up here at the beginning of the year 10 wins. They are on pace for 6.2, which puts them 3.8 games behind projected. A very good guess. They are your number 4 team in terms of disappointment.
The other one I would have to say is the Bengals.
Cincinnati was not as big of a disappointment despite the fact they lost Burrow.
Okay. And then, biggest surprise would have been the Browns.
They're not. In terms of improvement, close, but they're not.
Chargers.
The Chargers were the biggest disappointment by far. They're actually twice as big as the second team, which I find hilarious. Like, how did Staley keep his job?
I got to go Packers.
The Packers are an improved team with over 2.5 more wins than projected. It is that they're in a tier that's by themselves, but it's the second tier.
Hey, Aman, welcome back. Dylan, make sure you get those questions in there, and we'll definitely answer them. Let's get to Aman's
defense questions. Love it. This is what we got to have at the playoffs. We got to maximize everything.
What's your scoring system like, Aman, in terms of is it just that you want to get the team with the low score? Are sacks included? Are fumble recoveries? Is your defense included with special teams? All of those
matter with the defensive world. But I got to tell you, off the surface, the ones playing New England, the other ones playing the Cowboys.
Yeah.
I just we can dive in all of this. I'm not sure, even though it's in Buffalo, I ever want to bet against the Cowboys when the option is Zappy for the other defense. Because on the field, you look at the two units, the actual Bills defense and the Chiefs defense are not terribly different. Both of them have moderately decent pass rushes. Now, granted, the Chiefs is more stacked upon Jones. And if you neutralize Jones, you can neutralize the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. Both of them play a decent coverage that's more of a we're going to hit you than keep the pass from getting through, more of a tackle the catch type system. They're basically the same speed. Like if you're playing these defenses in Madden, they should be essentially both 86s. That's how I look at the Bills and the Cowboys. But the ones playing Zach, all right. So all the turnovers in the world are included.
All right, Dylan. Great. We'll
the
get
ones
to
playing
Dylan
Zappy
and
and the ones
here.
playing Dak. To me, that to me makes it no. I'm not sure New England is going to put up significant amount of points, even being at home against Kansas City. New England is one of two teams that is already mathematically out of the playoffs, which is amazing with 20% of the season left. So I'm leaning against that. I think that Zeke blew his entire load in Pittsburgh. He still is an aging dinosaur running back.
You just have it in for Zeke, man.
I used to love Zeke. I just recognize that there's a certain point you're too old to play running back, and Zeke's there.
So Amon, I think, for lack of a better word, I think that the play this week is definitely, like Joe said, it's definitely whoever's playing New England, and the stats back it up. Although the Chiefs are not a dominant defense by any stretch of the imagination, they do not cause a lot of turnovers, and they don't make a lot of things happen. The odds that New England scores a lot of points against and just taking the emotional factor in, the Chiefs are coming off a tough loss. Patrick Mahomes is going to go out there and try to do what he does. And so when you go into this thinking that this game could probably be over in the second or third quarter, for all intents and purposes. So knowing this,
you're going to have Zappy throwing the ball to try to get into you. They might make interceptions.
You're at least getting there. Now, in order for the Bills to win, the Dallas teams against Dallas have not scored a mind-bending amount of points against them because they're just really good. And any points that you get from sacks, interceptions, or fumble recoveries, you are then offset because they score a boatload of points against you. And so that's the main issue with Dallas. They do throw the ball around the lot, though. Like Joe said, any defense going up against the Patriots. So in week 14, Steelers, they only got 6. Then 17 the Chargers, and they're not a good defense. No. 16 the Giants, and they're not a good defense. 17 the Colts, they're not a good defense. The highest scoring defense was the Cowboys defense against the Patriots. They scored 30 points, and the Saints to score 28. And the Saints don't cause a lot of turnovers either.
No, they
don't. It's a crapshoot, right? But at the same point in time, the Bills, just as a comparison, though, Amon, and we'll get to Dylan. The comparison here is when the Bills played the Patriots in week 7, the Bills caused no interceptions, no fumbles recovered. They had, points scored, whatever, and they scored a total of 3 points against the Patriots because the Bills also don't make a lot of turnovers.
But that's also a division game. So that means we consider.
So in my mind, I think the Chiefs is a solid play, and I would definitely go with the Chiefs. So
all right. So what do we got here? We got standard quarterback 2. All right. So I got you. You don't want to play Stroud this week at all. Let's just start with that. It's a rookie coming off a concussion. You want to avoid that. The propensity for having a major disappointment in Stroud is big. So here, if you don't play Levis, Houston.
So I go Zach. It's a division game. I get it. And Flacco has looked good. And the Bears, they are susceptible against the pass, but they have been playing really good football over the last several weeks in terms of what the Bears actually were performing at earlier in the year. And I think that DeVito is and we'll get to that, Amon.
I don't want to touch DeVito. So
I think DeVito, Joe, is not an option this week because New Orleans plays a really low ball style of game. They want to choke you out essentially as much as they can. Carr hasn't been playing really good. I think DeVito will score like 2 touchdowns. And the bonus for DeVito is that out of all 4 of those quarterbacks, DeVito puts up points with his legs. So DeVito can easily get 80 yards on the ground himself, along with Saquon. So I would consider DeVito for that option of potentially 2 touchdowns and over 50 yards rushing. Levis, I don't think is an option this week. For the reason why is that Derrick Henry, I think, will take a lot of those touchdowns towards the red zone if they do in fact get towards the red zone, and I don't think Levis will actually turn it around. Now, with that said, why I picked Zach, and Flacco is Flacco. Flacco has some good games, then he can turn around and have a 4-interception game. I don't really just trust Joe Flacco, but I do think that he could be a solid option. So that leaves me with DeVito and Zach Wilson. And I think what Zach Wilson showed us in a pretty bad weather game against a very decent Houston team is that he still got something. He's still got something. This is a divisional match. They want to win, and Miami hasn't looked great. And so I'm going to put my, throw it into the ring for Zach Wilson, and my second would be DeVito because of those rushing yards.
So Bob, we're coming at this from very different angles. First off, I do
agree.
He
scares me too, Dylan. He absolutely scares me too.
So I agree that DeVito can run around because that team doesn't really have an offense. I mean, the Giants is structurally standpoint a broken team. I like Flacco's matchup the most out of all of them. Chicago is the worst of those 4 defenses by a degree of magnitude. So that makes me start with Flacco. But there is the red flag with Flacco. He hasn't played consecutive games, despite the fact he's been in the league for this time, since Lamar Jackson's rookie year. He hasn't played more than 5 consecutive games in a row. And we're getting to that point now. And the question is, does he fall apart and stumble? Yeah. So that's a Flacco concern moving forward. Like feel like I've been saying that for my entire life, a Flacco concern. But he's playing. That's the worst defense of the bunch by far.
So
I cannot trust the MILF Hunter under any circumstances.
Guys, you're going to witness this in the chat here. I'm going to fight you on this, Joe, because I disagree with you, and I'm going to bring this point up. Going to stats here. Going to stats, we have the last seven quarterbacks that the Bears have played. Okay, the last great quarterback was the Chargers with Justin Herbert. He put up 29 fantasy points against them. Okay. That was week 8. Week 9 was the Saints. Carr put up 20 points all year. Right? Yeah. Then they played the Panthers, the Lions, the Vikings, the Lions. Now, a lot of people
Goff's the best quarterback they've played.
A lot of people like Goff. And in those weeks, Goff has put up a total in both weeks of only above 20. So 17 the first week with 3 interceptions. The most recent weeks, they picked off Goff twice, Dobbs 4 times, and the Goff again 3 more times. So yes,
as you're pulling up defenses against, so the Bears are better than I give them credit for. They also haven't really played anyone with Goff being.
I will give you that.
So, but the answer I'm going to go for here on your quarterback at least, Dylan, and we'll break through all of them is it's actually Levis. The defender's not the Flacco thing. He's going to also be outside in the cold as he's getting tired, and he's, like I said, it's never fun playing quarterbacks in Chicago. But Levis is actually the one I want to go with for a couple of reasons here. If Henry doesn't play a lot because they're A, he's nicked up, and B, they need to find out what Spears is definitively if they're not going to make the playoffs. That means to me a lot of cheap yardage that's thrown to Spears. Levis does move around a little bit. That Houston defense is starting to get into shambles, especially as their offense is being held back. And I do think that Levis is going to give you an opportunity because of what I started with in the first place. You don't want to take Stroud off a concussion. I believe the game script of this one is Stroud is going to play poorly. And as a result, there's going to be a lot more opportunities for Tennessee. Even if it does end up being a Henry show, I think Levis is going to give you enough safe upside points that I know Danny DeVito's throwing an interception. I know the Mill Hunter's going to get caught in the weeds.
Not Danny DeVito.
Tommy, it doesn't matter.
Danny DeVito was playing football. I would watch him play.
I think he is. I really think he is. But at the end of the day, dude, to me, Levis is the highest upside one. He might also be the highest floor because there's always a possibility that Jalen Ramsey picks off Wilson 3 times.
It is.
That part can't be because he's covering Wilson.
So I do want to get to Amon and then back to Dylan's question here. So Dylan, I'm intrigued by Zach Wilson. I'm scared of him. I'm intrigued by him all at the same time. I'm not willing to sell my soul yet for the 3 touchdowns that he had last week.
Dude, I'm not putting Wilson in a playoff game.
But it's something to consider because Miami does score at a rapid pace. They got smoked a little bit here by Tennessee, and I don't know what Tennessee decided to do there, but they played really
Let
well
Miami be
against
themselves.
them. And with that known, it gave Levis a lot of opportunities. If Zach Wilson gets the same number of opportunities, there could be that Zach Wilson throws 3 interceptions. It could very well be that. But there's a very realistic possibility that he could put up 3 touchdowns again this week. So all things considered, in a low scoring game, guys like DeVito might be a better option because there's going to be more running in that game. But for Zach is in the same place that Levis is. The opportunities are going to be there. He's not getting benched again because they'd have no backup. So and they're playing they're both playing in the South this time of year, so that's good. So in my mind, Levis and Wilson will probably be, I would make that final decision come Sunday once I see a little bit more about what's going on with Houston's health and what's going on with, if any news comes across the wire about anything going on with Zach Wilson. I'm more on more on Zach Wilson than I am on Joe Levis. So let us move on a little bit here. I want to get to this question from Amon and then go back to Dylan here. Worried about Jefferson, thinking about playing Rice or Devonta over him. I 100% would play Devonta Smith.
Yeah, you got to play Devonta Smith.
Devonta Smith, because, again, Jefferson, they changed quarterbacks. Again, it's Nick Mullins. We don't really have a good grasp on Nick Mullins, right? He's played before, but we don't have grasp. So for me, Rashee Rice has been playing like a dog too in recent.
Rice has been tearing up. But here's the reason I want to take Devonta Smith. When you look at the highlight film from last week of Seattle getting destroyed, it was the essentially same play shown in 3 different ways with all their deep passes. It was a speed receiver attacking Adams, which is their back left third of the defense. And every single one of their touchdowns was screaming down the left-hand sideline, you cannot keep up with speed. Devonta Smith is faster than Debo. Ertz throws a better deep ball than Purdy. And Seattle doesn't have another option than playing Adams. I think Devonta is going to go off. Of that 3, I think he is your safest ceiling and the highest ceiling. I absolutely love that. The problem with Rice is New England's defense is the antithesis of their offense. That defense is good. And the reality is Kansas City's might have all the anger they want in their souls. They've only gone out into the 20s 3 times this season. That team is not scoring points this year. Philly is. And I would go Devonta because of the matchup and because of the situation that defense that he is going to rip apart is going to be on fire. So for that, I would go there. And I understand that means that we're putting J. Jeff on the sideline, but we're also in a situation where, yes, Minnesota's on the verge of making the playoffs or getting eliminated. They're about as bubble as you can be. But J. Jeff's contract ain't a bubble. It's coming up. And do you really want to risk yourself with Nick Mullins out there? And that's something that needs to be factored. The way that he handled sitting out has warranted these questions explicitly. And when my playoffs are on the line, I want to go for the guy who I believe has a gaping hole that he can run 70 yards through and do it a bunch. Because Seattle has shown they can't stop that. They just can't. So I think you're going to have a Monday Night Miracle in Devonta Smith, and I'm all in on it. I'm also, for the record, I'm also playing him as well. So full disclosure.
So let's take a look at your second question here, Dylan. Another defense question: Raiders defense against the Chargers or the Ravens defense against Jacksonville? I lean Raiders because no Herbert or Allen. I hate playing on Thursday. Okay. Yeah, you know me, Dylan. I hate Thursday games as well, to have any starters in Thursday games. But to be quite honest with you, I mean, there's two things going on here. The Raiders defense isn't good. I mean, it doesn't cause a lot of turnovers, but you get the opportunity to get that 0 points scored. In that game that the Raiders had against the Vikings, I mean, that was dumb. I mean, it made me feel like really bad to watch any part of that game that happened. So it feels like that's another realistic possibility that the Raiders this week could get lucky and throw up another 0. But the Chargers still have Austin Eckler, and Austin Eckler could definitely throw his hat into the ring and have a really, really good week. Quarterback situation, we don't know anything about this quarterback, and it's going to be rough. So there's going to be opportunities to get interceptions and sacks from Max Crosby.
Let me hit on that part about Herbie leaving. Earlier in the year, Aaron Rodgers, Hall of Famer, no doubt, leaves the Jets. The market overall told us he was worth 4.5 to 5 points per game.
Mm-hmm.
When Herbert got knocked out and said he's not going to play, it was between 8 and 7.5 points. So in terms of the fact that we are now stepping into an unknown, it could be a disaster. However, talent-wise, the Raiders have Crosby and nothing else.
Yeah.
But the Chargers have looked bad for a while. And I bring this up because Herbert hasn't looked great. This is somewhat of a name recognition thing. And I don't think that the Raiders get blanked 2 weeks in a row. It just doesn't seem probable. Now, I would be a lot more comfortable leaning the Raiders' direction if I knew Jacobs was playing and Jacobs was going to be healthy.
But this is the defense, though, against
I know,
Chargers.
but the reason is because they wouldn't be on the field as much.
Oh, yeah.
This is straight up whoever's on the field less. Jacksonville's unit is so much superior. It's a fact.
It is.
But with the thing with Jacksonville is when I'm mixing all of them now, when Taylor was on that rise until he got hurt on that, 2 games ago in overtime, they were going somewhere and they were humming. And he was clearly hurt last week against Cleveland. The question is, does he recover against a Jacksonville team when Jacksonville's now all of a sudden playing for their playoffs? They thought they had this thing cakewalked away, and now it's very real. They might not even win the division. So there's a nothing game essentially and 2 guys playing for everything. Of the 40 units out there in the competition, I believe the gap between the Ravens offense and the current hurt Jacksonville offense, the Ravens defense and Jacksonville offense, is larger than the no talent Raiders defense and the severely hobbled Chargers offense. So I would rather take the known over the unknown. So that's a very long story short. I'm going with Jacksonville will not perform as well as the Chargers, and I do believe the Ravens are going to give you some sacks. Unless I'm mistaken, they're still leading the league in sacks. And if Taylor can't run around, it might be just easy pickings because Jacksonville's also on their 3rd or 4th left tackle right now. So there's problems with the Jacksonville offense, and if Taylor can't play miracle ball, I don't see how the Ravens don't exploit it.
So the thing I want to bring up, Dylan, to your point, I'm actually on the other side of this a little bit, and I just want to bring up kind of why I'm on the other side of this. When, for all intents and purposes, the stats that I'm reading here, Baltimore has 19 takeaways on the season, and they've given up the ball only 15 times. When you go to Vegas, Vegas has 14 takeaways on the season, but have given up the ball 24 times. So I think the opportunities for the Raiders to get a turnover are probably going to be a little bit higher for me than the Raiders versus the Ravens. I think the Ravens are going to be less likely to get a turnover against Jacksonville and put it into points than I think that the Raiders defense would be to put it into points. Although the Jacksonville Jaguars do turn the ball over a lot, 22-1 the season. So they're almost exactly like on a dead heat. They're almost dead even. And I think that Max Crosby, if sacks are a thing for your league and they get you points, I think Max Crosby has the chance to sack Easton Stick like a couple thousand times in this game. Because that offensive line wasn't really working for Justin Herbert either. and it's definitely not going to work for Easton State. So
and they don't even try to run the ball with the Chargers.
For me, Dylan, I'm going with the Raiders defense tonight. I don't like taking Thursday, but I think that he's the better play in this scenario. So let's get to your next.
And in general, Thursdays are lower scoring as a thing. All right, so pick one of these guys: Connor, Ford, Single. If it's a pick one, this is rough because that Niners defense will destroy Arizona.
Yeah. Okay, so all right, Dylan.
This is a hard one here, Dylan. This clearly is the weak spot of your roster.
Here's how I'd rank these just going into this week. I would put, if Dameon Pierce wasn't in that backfield for Houston just doing stupid things, I would totally take Devin Singletary as my play. Because the San Francisco defense is just really, really good. And they faced Seattle last week, and that did not turn out well for anybody who rostered a Seattle running back in that game. It wasn't really something that you wanted to play, Kenneth Walker in or Zach Charbonnet in. Now, Ford, if he plays, Chicago has a good rush defense because their pass defense isn't as good as their rush defense. So it creates that funnel. It creates that funnel where you're passing it more than you're running it. And Ford, while electric, you still have Kareem Hunt there as well. And so Ford, I think, is out for all. I think Ford does put up maybe in PPR does put up maybe like 10 points or so, but you're looking for a boom. And I don't think Ford has that boom, especially with the injury concern. And we've seen so many players this year, Dylan, re-injure themselves if they come in and they play right off the bat. Jacob, we'll get to your question here as well. So I think Ford's out of the question. Now, Clyde Edwards-Helaire versus McKinnon is an interesting question for sure. New England, I don't think that teams know how to approach New England recently. It's been really, really strange. Whether do I run against them? Do I pass against them?
Well, you don't run against them. They're a very good run-stopping team.
For that reason, I think New England. I think that I'm not taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire and I'm not taking McKinnon, although they probably will get a sneaky touchdown towards the red zone. So, Joe, go ahead.
So as I look at this, Bob, McKinnon to me is the pick. Long story short, and the reason for this is McKinnon is of the entire group is the only pass catcher. And when we look at way Kansas City is going to come out, they know they can't run the ball between the tackles against New England. No one can. The Connor completely gross matchup. You got to take it off the board. You said everything about Pierce and Singletary.
But I like Singletary. But that's to me to say, I think Singletary is the better play out of
I get that. But again, going back to Houston, concussed quarterback, concussed rookie quarterback, not going to get a lot of rushing opportunities as we're getting more incomplete passes than before. And oh, by the way, people have started figuring out how to cover Houston's offense, especially without Collins in there. So I'm going to super pissed off. Best player in the league needs to throw the ball to someone because Kelsey is taking a step back and Rice is a rookie. I think it's a giant opportunity for McKinnon to stretch this field laterally instead of vertically. And I think McKinnon is really probably the answer of that group. But again, it's not a sexy group to say the least.
And Dylan, to Joe's point, he's definitely right about that. The injury to Stroud and potentially and the injury to Nico and the injury to Tank Dell are definitely, you're going to definitely see an impact on the carries that Singletary had. Yes, Singletary scored a touchdown and got 65 yards. And yes, the Titans are sucking most definitely against the run because teams can pass. But if CJ, and this is a decision that I want you to make on Sunday.
Yes. Okay?
I want you to make this decision on Sunday. If CJ Stroud is playing, he's going to be playing hurt and he's going to be handing the ball off a lot.
And he also would not have practiced the entire week.
And Singletary will be the better play out of this group. If for some reason you see on Sunday morning when you wake up there's news that CJ Stroud isn't playing. Slot in McKinnon because of what Joe said about the pass catching opportunities. We know McKinnon went wild last year with pass catching opportunities, so that's a good option there. Although New England does play the running back position well, Kansas City is going to be mad. They are going to be moving that ball down the field. They're not going to be stopped 2 weeks in a row like this.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, they're definitely not losing 5 out of 7.
In my mind, it goes Singletary, then McKinnon. If CJ Stroud is playing, if CJ Stroud is not playing and Davis Mills is playing, it goes McKinnon and then Singletary.
See, I'm actually opposite. I think I'd be more interested in Singletary if Mills is playing.
I wouldn't because the Titans are one of those teams that's like a run funnel, right? Where they where they in order to get that, the pass has to be there. And the pass isn't going to be there with Davis Mills. Davis Mills is.
I don't think it's going to be there with Stroud. Maybe the answer is just don't touch Houston this week at all.
Yeah, that's an option too. All right, let's see. What?
Yeah, Bob, you're controlling the question playground right now. This is all on you.
So, Dylan, I hope that helps. I hope we answered all your questions. I know that I might have. I know that I might have missed one. I do think that the Broncos is a good defense to think about because they have been going crazy. So let's get to Jacob, and Dylan, we'll come back to your comment here. I'm in a gross spot, Jacob said. If Jacobs is out, do I replace with Abdullah, Pierce, Sanders, Algier, or Khalil Herbert? These are the best options. Okay, so Joe, I think that
I think you just did a good job breaking down Houston, so I don't think we need to dive into them again.
Yeah, we're not taking Pierce. I think that the idea of Miles Sanders this year has been a gross idea that a lot of people have had, and
if you went super receiver heavy, you had to rely on Miles Sanders. It has not been a fun ride.
But we're fighting. We're in the playoffs. We're there. Miles Sanders 1 touchdown this year. Not a blessing. Algier, with the way that the Falcons have used their running backs, Algier is almost like an afterthought, but almost a forethought some weeks in some games, which is really weird and interesting to think about. And then Khalil Herbert, the Bears are one of those teams that we've seen Roschon Johnson come in and we've seen him play well. Then we've seen Herbert play well occasionally.
Yeah, but have you seen anyone run against Cleveland well?
But we haven't seen anybody run against Cleveland well. So for that reason, Herbert's out. I think Herbert is out because the Cleveland defense is pretty good. So we go to Algier then. Algier had 9 attempts last week, 40 yards. So you're looking at it, basically, it goes from, every week he's gotten yards. Every single week with his lowest output.
They're giving him the ball.
With the lowest output being week 3 and week 4, and the most recent lowest output being week 13 against the Jets, where he got 26 yards, and it was a gross game anyway.
But that's a great run defense.
But he's getting yards, and when we look at what they've been doing, he can occasionally get a touchdown. He hasn't scored a lot this year, but they're giving him the ball in good situations, and they continue to give him the ball in good situations.
Yeah, they are.
So I'm a little shocked by that, to be honest with you, because I thought that the Falcons, wanted to win, and we know that the Panthers have a terrible rush defense. It has been terrible. They've been terrible for a long time. And we'll get to your question in a moment, Dylan.
So, Bob, let me jump into this for Jacob's answer.
Yeah, so Jacob, I'm on Tyler Algier out of all of those options. A long-winded response. I think Tyler Algier is the better option against the Panthers. I think that the Panthers are they're a bottom-tier team. It is a divisional matchup. They're a bottom-tier team. And the Falcons can win the game. Watch them go and lose this game, because that is something that the Falcons would like to do this year, is just lose and disappoint people. But I'm on Algier.
So the logical argument why you would go against Algier is he's not the best running back on the team. He might not even be the second best running back on the team. But the simple fact is we have now clearly learned that coaching staff does not know what they're doing. And if we didn't know that 2 years ago, we certainly knew it last year, and we have proven it this year again.
And we want to
Best
get back
running
to
back
Jones,
on
too.
that team, and possibly the best one in the league, talent-wise, is definitely Bijan. Saquon might be in the conversation. But yet Algier gets the ball constantly. And I get why that has been the scary point of playing Algier all year long. But I start this off by hating on their coach because he has shown what he is. He's someone who wants to hurt his team by not giving the ball to Bijan and giving it to Algier. And he's going to keep doing it because he has shown that.
And everybody listening, Joe is a Bijan owner, so this does sit really.
I'm a Bijan everything, man. So the bottom line is that he's given the ball to Algier. For better or worse, he's the only person, aside from maybe Herbert, I can guarantee I'm getting something out of. But the reason I'm going Algier as well is because I don't want to play Cleveland's defense.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. That's the fundamental answer.
That is the fundamental answer here. So, Joe, let's get back to Dylan's first original question. We jumped right into C.J. Stroud and did not answer this question. We want to make
the question. My bad. Sorry, Dylan.
Hopefully that helped, Jacob. Hopefully that gave our opinion there. And always check back in on Sunday before those games start. Best roster available out of these players. So we know we talked about the QB situation. We talked about that. We want to pick 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 flex. I think the guy I'm most disappointed by here, Dylan, and I've been disappointed by him 2 or 3 weeks in a row now because the matchups have been incredible for him, and Gardner Minshew has not been getting him the ball, is Josh Downs. I think Josh Downs, for me, is not in the equation this week. I'm not even putting him on the radar for myself. Whether his matchup is good or bad, he has not proven that he is he's getting targets, which is the worst part about it. But either he's not doing anything with those targets or they're low value targets. And that's not what you want this week. So he's off my board. A guy that is on my board and is kind of locked in to a flex position in a lot of leagues is Jayden Reed. Jayden Reed has been playing good football. And the Packers wide receiver situation is something to monitor because like that Travius Wick, I think he's not playing this week. He got hurt in that game. And Jayden Reed came in, or Jayden Reed's always been in, but I'm saying that Jayden Reed was there. And yes, he doesn't get a lot of yards, but he does get those targets in the red zone. And he's gotten them since the beginning of the season. He went 4 for 38 and he rushed his touchdown this week. He rushed for 4 for 38, and he caught 8 balls for 27 yards. So he's not really doing anything with that with those targets, but he's catching them. And I think that with this newfound weird rushing, he had 4 rushing attempts this week against the Giants. I think that he's if Christian Watson is out again this week.
That's the key.
Which you need to check on Sunday when the injury reports definitely come out. But I think for me, my flex this week or a definite wide receiver this week is going to be Jayden Reed. But that is dependent upon Christian Watson's health.
So, Bob, for me, I'm going to hit my obvious ones here. There are no doubt. You have to play Isaiah likely at your tight end. That's not a doubt.
Trey McBride's been really good, though.
I understand it, but likely has stepped into that role and potentially even surpassed what Andrews can do. I really like the way they're utilizing him, downfield versatility. Baltimore's putting themselves in a very good offensive spot by pushing the ball downfield and likely showing he's able to do it very well. So I'm definitely playing likely. Obviously, Ayuk and Diggs are unbenchable, so you're playing them without a doubt.
Hey, whoa, wait a minute. We just brought this up. Diggs was totally benchable last week.
Let's put it. If there is that 90-mile-an-hour wind that Buffalo tends to do in December playing, you can make an argument for benching Diggs. In fact, actually, that variable is what I want to bring in for my running back conversation. If it looks like the weather is chill and regular and not a gajillion-mile-an-hour wind, I don't want to play Pollard. But if there is a ton of wind, I am playing Pollard. And the reason is because they're going to have to rely on the run more. And I think that Dallas at this state right now, if all things equal, they've shown you based upon their last 3 home games, Pollard's an afterthought. If Pollard is forced to be the thought because of the run, I want to play him. But if not, I want to remove it. And likewise, you can make an argument, okay, I don't know how he can't not play Diggs.
I was
He's
just
got
saying
one of the best.
last week. I was saying last week. This week, the Cowboys defense is totally a vulnerable defense that they could take advantage
It's an all or nothing defense.
It is the DK Metcalf effect here. Diggs is a player that I think that you absolutely need to start. So
you also have to play Mixon. And this is coming from possibly the biggest Mixon hater on the planet. And the reason is Minnesota with Nick Mullins is just going to be giving up good field position all day, every day. The dude's not an NFL quarterback. He's obviously, he's the third
Jacob,
quarterback of the year. He might be the fourth quarterback of the year. And when you look at this and say,
thanks for the question, Jacob.
They're going to get Cincinnati already shown they want to run the ball without Burrow. I'm riding Mixon, but I'm going to give a different flex than Bob, who went with Reed here. I'm going Hollywood. And the reason for this is that for some reason, Kyler Murray plays his absolute best football against the Niners, mostly because there's a lot of garbage time. And when there's garbage time, he gives the ball to Hollywood a lot. He also gives the McBride a lot. But for the flex, I'm going to go with Hollywood over Reed because I know Hollywood is the primary catcher there in a team that's going to be losing the entire game.
I disagree with that. I disagree that he's the primary ball catcher there. I think Trey McBride has put himself into the conversation to be one of the primary ball catchers in there, and I think that rookie Michael Wilson has put himself into the conversation as being a primary ball catcher there. This Arizona team is not a team that I'm comfortable. Just like a lot of teams are not comfortable going with the Jets. I am not comfortable, going with any pass catcher facing the 49ers. Yes, I know what can happen when you do that, but I'm not a fan of anybody that faces the 49ers. So for me, although I think McBride is locked in as a tight end one in a lot of situations, and the Niners are susceptible to good tight ends. They are susceptible to not good tight ends, but
we'll get to you, George.
It's just luck. The last good tight end to have a good game against the Niners was Hawkinson, and that was 86 yards. The other ones, the Buccaneers, Kate Otten had 49 yards, and the next best tight end after that is not even a good tight end. It's Noah Fant, and he's not on radar. So for me in this situation, when we consider all these options and when we consider the players that you have on the board, I think what I would go with here. And based off of what Joe said, based off of what we've been seeing about game direction and game script, I think you have to play Mixon at running back. I think he's a must start. I also am playing James Cook because this game is going to be a game where Buffalo's not going to be out of it. So James Cook is never going to be.
I think Buffalo's going to win it.
I don't think that James Cook is going to be irrelevant in this game. And James Cook has been playing decent enough over the last several weeks. So I'm taking as my two running backs in this situation is Cook and Mixon, and I'm really not even thinking about Pollard right now. So with that said, I think my two wide receivers are Diggs and Ayuk because Ayuk against Arizona, it's definitely a matchup that you can exploit. But whether in recent weeks Debo's been getting a lot of action, whether this is going to be a heavy.
You say that, but Ayuk still put up 16 plus as Debo's going on.
I get it. We want Ayuk to do that. So I'm on Diggs and Ayuk. And for the same reason that I'm off McBride this week, for that reason, I'm on Likely. But I think that Likely and McBride, I think for me, it's a toss up because it's really dependent on how.
Hey, Bob, what happens if Watson plays? Do you put the other tight end in your flex?
If Watson is playing, I'm probably putting Pollard in the flex. If Watson
so McBride isn't hitting your roster no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. If Watson is playing, Reed is not on my. It could make Reed better because they could get closer to the end zone, but in my mind, if Watson isn't playing, my lineup is the quarterback that you want, Mixon, Cook, Diggs, Ayuk, likely, and then Jaden Reed.
All right, Bob, keep
Hopefully
track of
that
these.
helps.
There's
Dylan.
so many questions
George,
coming in. I've lost it. You were in
George,
charge.
welcome back. We're going to get to Jacob's question, then we're going to get to George, and then back to Dylan here. So would you consider Patrick Taylor over Algier? I would. I would consider Patrick Taylor over Algier, and this is why, you know, you always want to check those injury reports coming out on Sunday. I don't know. Let me check and see if that game, if they're both late games. Well, the Falcons game is an early game, so you're going to know a little bit more about the Packers a little bit later. But the Buccaneers have a decent run defense, and the Panthers don't. So I would consider Patrick Taylor because Jordan Love is a better quarterback than Desmond Ridder, and the movement down the field will be better overall because they'll be able to move the ball against the secondary, and there could be some red zone touchdowns and touches for Patrick Taylor in there. But Algier also is facing against a bottom barrel defense, and if there was ever a week to deploy Tyler Algier, it would probably be this week. So all things considered, I would make that decision on Sunday. But the data tells you that Algier should have a decent game. He's not going to have a high floor. It's going to be a very low floor. But, you know, when you consider Patrick Taylor versus him, it's the high value touches may not go to Taylor in the red zone anyway. And Jordan Love will probably push it in himself. So that's always something to watch out for. Desmond Ridder isn't really, he gets a couple touches here and there like that, but it's not really an option.
One more thing before you jump off of that, Bob. The only
George,
reason
welcome back. We're gonna
I would want Taylor in that situation is if Jones is out. Because if not, they are going to rely on Jones because they know Jones. That's what LaFleur does. He relies on the veteran a little bit more. And you know Algier's getting the rock.
Yeah, and Dylan, to your point here, I think it's fair to want to start McBride over likely because you're playing the Lamar owner. And Lamar,
that's caveat.
And it's fair to think that. And Joe disagrees with that. He's talked about this a little bit before when he's shared that he likes to snipe points off of other players. I do like that. So, like, say for example, the other guy's running Brock Purdy. I'm not sitting Kittle and Debo because of that. But these aren't that level of talent. So we go down the board here, and this would be like saying, okay, my opponent has Levis, so I won't start Akinakwo. Bad example, but it still gets the point across. Is make the decision based off of the opportunities and the level. So if Lamar Jackson does end up throwing 3 touchdowns and they all go to likely, you're gonna filch those points off of him a little bit, and you're gonna get more points because again with your quarterback scoring, I'm not sure, but in our league, quarterbacks score 4 and other players score 6. So there's something to think about with that as well.
Well, the other reason I was going with likely is this.
They're either good.
That at the end of the day, Baltimore's going to score way more touchdowns than Arizona's going to. It's just a fact. So there's more touchdowns to go around, regardless of whether you're playing against Lamar or not. Tua or Fields.
And Dylan, we'll get to your next question after.
To me, this is a no-brainer. Tua is shown that there is a problem there, and if Tyreek does not play, that offense isn't going to do a damn thing. And Fields, even though he's probably got a worse arm, I'm not even sure of that anymore. I do know Fields will run for his life and make something productive happen.
But again, it's the best. It's a good rush defense, and we were slandering, a couple of players for that very reason.
Yeah, but if Tyreek Hill doesn't play, I don't think Tua is a viable option. Period. And Fields still is top 5.
So George, I'm kind of on the same. I'm kind of on the same thing, but for a different reason. Tua. In the game that he played this past week, this was almost a layup for Tua. This should have been a game where Tua put up 3 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns. And I know that Miami still, they put up those touchdowns early on the way to their run. But this is proving that Miami can also be competitive running the ball where Tua is just throwing for yards. And it was a really big disappointment for Tua this past week that he didn't do anything like that. With Fields is constantly going to be in this game. He's never going to be an afterthought.
Cleveland can't run away with it.
I'm not saying Tua's an afterthought. I'm just saying that Fields is the rush and is the pass. So whether Fields throws I mean, the other problem is that Fields could fumble the ball, and then that's negative points in your direction. I don't think Tua is going to throw multiple interceptions this week, so there's no chance for negative points, I think, for Tua. I think Fields can physically, just the way he plays, is a turnover, magnet. And so you could get occasional turnovers from Fields. Is this a week that is going to happen? Cleveland is definitely a team that causes turnovers and gets after the ball. So I would be worried about Fields in that respect, but I wouldn't be worried because he's never going to be out of the game. So, you look at Fields' stats, and the long of it here, you look at Fields' stats over the course of the last couple of games, and you just take a three-game sample size. Against Detroit last week, it was 1 touchdown passing, 1 touchdown rushing, and I believe there was a turnover somewhere in there. Against Minnesota, no touchdowns passing, no touchdowns rushing. Against Detroit, it was 1 touchdown passing and then over 100 yards. So he hasn't yet gotten back to that elite status.
And he's due.
And, you could say he's due. Long and short of it, I think that Tua, if Hill plays, Tua's the guy you want to go with because that coach does not want to lose 2 games in a row this late in the season. And I think Tua is the play this week.
And they're also amazing at home.
Even if Fields is out, I still think that Tua is the play. I just don't trust Fields enough right now. He's electric on the field.
I think Sauce can take Waddle out of a game, and if Tyreek's on the bench, I don't see how Miami's moving the ball in the air. It's just going to be a handoff.
They're moving the ball with the rush. Yeah,
they're just going to hand it off, and Tua's not going to do anything because they do have a good running attack.
I'm just worried about Fields' turnovers. Fields
I'm not
the ball over too much.
I'm not.
All right. Question 2. Need 2 wide receivers in a flex out of these. Non-PPR. Kupp, Waddle, Olave, JSN, Keaton, Warren, and Ty Chandler. Oh, man. Okay. So, starting with Waddle. If Hill is out, George, I don't think Waddle is a start. We saw what Sauce did to Diggs. We've seen what Sauce can do over the course of the season. And Sauce is going to be lined up against their best wide receiver. They're not going to line him up against
he's following Waddle.
They're not going to line him up against Kevin Anderson. He's going to be lined up against their best wide receiver, regardless of, as long as it's not in the slot. So you look at it and you go, okay, what are we going to do here? Dylan, I think it's fine going with McBride. We'll definitely get back to you if you're willing to wait just a little bit.
So George, to get in here, the problem with Olave is that he is so immensely talented, and Derek Carr is wasting him. Derek Carr is the most individual player disappointment for me of the entire season. I thought he was going to be airing this thing out left and right, and at the end of the day, it's just not happening. And I get that Olave was hurt, but he's not hurt anymore. So I have all of this build up Olave love, and I'm just being straight up with you there. But at the same time, I'm looking at the rest of this in the receiver department, especially. I can't play GSN. There's a chance that Seattle's not even going to have a real quarterback playing, so I can't even consider him. I look at the other options of Waddle or Kupp. While I do think the Rams are going to have themselves a really, really solid day, if Kupp's healthy, you have to play him. I mean, there's no debate about it. Washington can't cover anyone, and I think I think even though there's 4 games left, you can safely say Washington has quit. And I think the Rams can rip them apart. That's a long road trip to just lose. And I think Kupp's got to have himself a ball game. Kupp might have a game where he wins by himself for you, like 2 touchdowns, $150 type thing. So to me, it comes down to Waddle or Olave. And it basically is the fact that the Giants can't cover anyone. So we're in the Superdome. We're in a must-win situation. I want to play from the Saints, Kamara and Olave, because I think both of them are going to go off in a much-win situation where the Giants despite the fact they've won 2 of the last 3, are not really going to be able to stop them.
To build off
Waddle
that, Joe,
could get shut down by Sauce.
to build off that, Joe. Yeah, I don't think Waddle's the start this week. You want to be convinced to start him, but I don't think he is. His
I mean, if Hill plays, he's a start.
No, but regardless of the matchup, the Jets have a good cornerback duo. It's going to be hard for him regardless. Waddle has the talent to supersede that, but in recent weeks, I mean, last week, what was it? 7 catches for 55 yards or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Non-PPR, that's 5 points. That doesn't help him.
That's not. You need touchdowns.
You need a touchdown. A guy I'm really interested in this week, George, is Jackson Smith. A couple weeks ago, we suggested, it's an option to drop Jackson Smith for another player because, you might have needed more value somewhere else. But the matchup here for
He's playing Slay. He's playing Philly.
They're playing Philly, but Philly's cornerback situation hasn't been the best. The ball's going to go to DK a lot. There's no doubt about it. Whether Locke is throwing him the ball or Geno Smith is throwing him the ball is going to go to DK Metcalf. But JSN has a really good matchup. And, we talk about matchups all the time. And we say, you don't want to pick the matchup over the talent and all that other stuff. But, he's been around. He hasn't been getting a lot of volume. But again, the matchup is intriguing and interesting. However, with that said, I think that the first number one start is Kupp, and the second is Olave. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of JSN as potential flex because Olave is going to be helped by the return of Rashid Shaheed. There's no doubt about that. Rashid Shaheed is going to come back, and it's going to open out the top, which is going to open up the underneath and a little bit further down the field for Olave. This is a fact that we know. We also know that the ball gets thrown to Shaheed a decent amount. But Olave is not out of the equation here. I mean, we've been all disappointed by Carr as a whole group of, fantasy football players. But the problem with Olave is his injury. He has an ankle injury. Last week it was, am I healthy or sick or whatnot?
In general, that foot has been messed up all year. We just have different parts of it breaking.
Now it's an injury. But last week, even with an illness and injury, 4 receptions, 28 yards, and a touchdown against the Panthers. The week before that, 119 yards. The week before that, 114 yards. I think, all things considering, I think Kupp is a must start. Absolutely don't bench him. Olave, I think, is a good start. I would look on Sunday morning and check that ankle injury, make sure he's practicing, because there's a lot of red herrings around at this point in time in the week about injuries. If he's healthy, he's your play as your other wide receiver. So that leaves you now where we're at JSN, Keaton, Warren, and Ty Chandler, and none of these guys are worth trusting a lot. So we can understand the one to start Waddle there. If it was me, I would go and I would say I think JSN is a good play and he could get a sneaky touchdown here against Philadelphia because they are susceptible to that. When we look at Keaton Mitchell hasn't done enough for me to make me want to play him. Although
I think there's a little more jealousy in that situation.
He has that electricity. He's not worth it to play for me. As it goes for Warren, ever since they lost Matt Canada and now we're starting Mitch Trubisky here in Pittsburgh, I don't trust anybody from Pittsburgh. I know Deontay Johnson had a good week last week, fantasy-wise, but he's got it saved with that touchdown. But the Steelers' offense is bad. It's real bad.
So, Bob, I'm going to go a different direction than JSN here for 2 reasons. First, I'm not trusting Lockett in a playoff game. Like I'm not trusting Lockett to make my team productive in the playoffs. And since we're in a non-PPR situation, I lean much harder running backs. And the thing with the Colts defense, people have gotten it in teams that like they can score. Like I think that might be New Orleans' highest scoring game, and you'd have to add up their second and third to get at what they
love. They can. They can score a lot of points against the
so they can let up mediocre to bad offenses putting up points.
Yeah.
And if the Steelers are ever going to put up, call it 24 or more points,
this is the
Jalen
week.
Warren is going to be involved in the process.
Yeah, to your point, Joe.
He's the most electric stealer by far.
It's a
and
good point
since
to
he's a
make.
running back, he gets the tiebreaker for me.
And here's and George, just for your information here, the Patriots, a much maligned group of running backs, 142 yards total. Pass catching wise, they each got five. Ramondre got 5 targets in the game against the Colts. You come down to the Buccaneers. Rachaad White had 100 yards rushing. That was, I think, the first game that Rachaad White went over 100 yards. Only 2 pass catching opportunities, but he caught both. Tajay Spears against the Colts caught 6 catches. Derrick Henry went off for 100 yards. Tajay Spears also rushed for 75 yards. And last week, the Colts had Chase Brown went off for 3 for 80 for 1 touchdown through the air, and Mixon had 79 yards on the ground. So, yeah, I mean, JSN has an incredible matchup, but Warren has this matchup too. And to Joe's point, a Cup, Olave, Warren team here is the potential to get you the boom points that you're looking for this week.
Yeah. And again, just avoid anything that can have Tyler Lockett ruining your team.
So let's get to this question, George.
Oh, you kickers, Bob. This is all you.
No, this is the next question from George. There's 4 questions in a row.
No, I know, but kickers. The kickers are your world, man.
So I love answering kicker questions. So let's dive into these kicker questions. So Groupie has been good and then not good at the same time. There are games where he can put up massive amounts of points because the Saints can't put the ball in the end zone, but he does miss kicks. And I'm the owner of this year in my Yahoo League. I changed midway through the season for Riley Patterson, and Riley Patterson has missed 2 friggin' extra points in the last 2 weeks, and it's like just negative points up the hoo-ha here. So when we look at what he's done recently, Groupie has missed a field goal against Carolina. He made 4 extra points against Detroit. He made, 5 out of 6 field goals against Atlanta, 1 field goal, and then 1 out of 2 field goals against the Bears in a recent week. So it's nothing that you're like, I've got to start this guy. He's had some decent games over the course of the season, but it's nothing like I've got to start this guy. So then we go to Brandon McManus. And again, the Jacksonville Jaguars offense, if it sputters, this could be a good play. McManus himself is also a guy that misses kicks. In the last 5 weeks, he's missed 2 kicks as well. And, if the Jaguars are going to stop before the end zone, this is a good play for McManus. So the question then that you got to ask yourself is, how do you think this game script is going to go, George? And I honestly think that if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, you have
the potential of getting run out of the building.
You have the potential to win, and you have to, and you can't settle for field goals.
You can't, because Lamar could run you out of the building.
Field goals are not going to win you that game,
but they could against the Giants,
right? And I think that with all that said, I think that the Saints are going to be a better option for field goals this week than the Jaguars. So I go
Recon. Welcome back. We were so glad you made the playoffs, man.
I go Groupie, but I don't really like either option. I try to search for something different. So let's go to George and then Dylan, and then let's get to Recon. Recon, we will get to your question as well. So question 4 from George here. Should I pick Chase Brown? If so, who should I drop? Charbonnet, Dowdle, JSN. I have Dowdle as a handcuff to Pollard. Yeah, I mean, we recommended picking up Dowdle, and Dowdle has scored 2 touchdowns, I believe, in the last 2 weeks. And so he has been paying off for you if you have wanted to start.
I'm not sure I want to cut any of those guys. This is a starting point.
I want Chase Brown on my team if I'm you, because, you do have, he has some good matchups later on down the line. But I'm not dropping Charbonnet, I'm not dropping Dowdle, and I'm not dropping JSN. So I wouldn't.
Yeah, so I think that just handcuffs you and saying that that's your answer.
So here. So Dylan, what you were saying earlier, struggling with the quarterback situation, seasoned vet and Flacco, You don't trust the Bears on the road. I mean, all of those things are fair. And the risky plays of DeVito, Wilson, and Levis would stick you into the option that playing Flacco would be a good option. The Bears could cause a turnover here and there. They might not. But this could easily be a game where Flacco goes and says, well, I'm not going to throw for 3 touchdowns. But he has been playing well. So, again, he has been playing well. So, when it gets here, Dylan, to McBride, Lamar will throw it to different guys. He will throw it to Zay. He will throw it to, what's the other guy? Robinson, I think it is. And he will throw it to ODB, if ODB decides that he wants to play. So that is a fair assessment to say that likely might not be the primary pass catcher there. And
he's not. He's just going to be better.
But it's
San Francisco doesn't let up points.
It's the struggle to play against San Francisco, and that's the one reason. I would caution against McBride. But like I said, I think McBride is a primary pass catcher for Kyler Murray. So if they do want to win this game,
I'm putting this out here right now. This is next year. Knowing Andrew's going to be back, I'm going to still have Isaiah Likely in my top 10 receivers, knowing he's the number 2 on his team. Like that's how much I'm on Isaiah Likely. Yeah. I am literally putting my stake in the ground and fighting for him.
And Joe,
he's the most consistent catcher on that team.
And Joe Bryce,
they just don't know it yet,
welcome
or maybe
back.
they do. All right,
so Dylan, yeah, I like I said, I'm on the Raiders this week.
And I'm on the Ravens. There's nothing about that.
I think that Jacobs being out is definitely going to cause the Raiders defense to have a lot more opportunities to cause turnovers. And the Ravens, they're in a position to do the same thing. I think the Ravens are more likely to do it, but I think that the Raiders have a better opportunity to do it. So I'm definitely on the Raiders this week. So
I just don't see how you see it from the Ravens are the best sacking team in the league, and Baltimore's on their Jacksonville's on their left tackle. They're one.
So I want to get to this from Bryce before Recon. So Joe, last week you were deadpanning Deontay, and Deontay actually had a good week. Do you think Deontay is owed an apology?
The only thing Deontay is doing successfully for this team is breaking it from the inside locker room. He's probably going to destroy the entire system. So, yes, he got a garbage time touchdown and then got in another fight with the quarterback room. So, do I think he deserves an apology? No, he's not even the best one on his team in terms of receiver. And Pittsburgh has had a legacy that goes all the way back to Antonio Brown of allowing immaturity to penetrate its wide receiver room. There was the belief Deontay wasn't going to be that, but he is. So, yeah, I mean, he's always been a volume catcher, but he runs out of bounds to avoid contact. Watching him in stadiums 3 separate times, he could have 4 more touchdowns if he'd be willing to try to outrun it, but maybe get hit. He's just not willing to do it. So, no, Deontay is always going to be on the Mount Rushmore of players that are better fantasy players than real-life players, right up there with Kyler Murray and Lockett.
But Joe will still not apologize, Bryce. Joe will still not apologize.
No, I mean, he's getting touchdowns now. Good for him. But at the end of the day, he's not someone you want on your real-life NFL team.
Recon here has a double question. So he put his lineup here, and he put his lineup, his opponent's lineup in there as well, and wants to know if he has a good shot at it. So here's his lineup: Josh Allen, Mixon, Swift, Amon-Ra, Justin Jefferson, Waddle, Njoku, and the Colts defense. And he's playing against Stafford, Jacobs, who obviously isn't playing this week, so that's going to be a boom for you, Recon. You're getting a little bit of luck there. Brian Robinson, who also is a little bit banged up. Rice, Ridley, Pittman, Kelsey, and the Atlanta defense. You could definitely.
I think you can. I'm going to bring someone up that we haven't talked about yet today. And this is an article at ESPN dropped.
We'll get to your question
either yesterday or today. I forget when I read it. About Pittman, guy we haven't talked about at all. I'm playing him in my lineup despite this being true.
You love Pittman, dude.
I do. But Joey Porter, the number 1 the first pick of the second round this year, has shut down receivers better than any other cornerback in the NFL.
Good. He's been really good.
He is going to be on Pittman. And if you look at what he did against players like Jamar Chase, who got 2 catches, and the only reason he got one of them was on a tip ball, There's a very good likelihood that Pittman is not going to be getting his usual 8+ catches a game. Porter has no problem standing a quarter of an inch behind the line of scrimmage every single play. He has no fear in his body whatsoever, and the Steelers don't penalize him for doing 15-yard penalties when he gets beat. Mm-hmm. So I am concerned about Pittman, but the way that I constructed my team, I got to ride with him. It's a ride or die situation.
But to the point that's being
so
made
I think that there's chance that your opponent's going to have some bust in him. Yeah. And I like your lineup more because he's going to be on a backup running back. He might have a receiver taken out, and that's all that.
I want to bring up this point, though, too, Joe. He has JT on the bench here, and he has Jaden Reed and Brandon Cooks.
He can't play JT this week.
He's not.
Yeah.
But Recon, to something that we discussed, too, that I want you to revisit on Sunday to think about is if Christian Watson's not playing and Tyreek Hill is banged up or not playing, it might be a good idea to sub Waddle in, put in Reed. And Cooks has not a great matchup this week at all either. So that would be like the only.
That being said, though, Cooks was 4 inches away from having 6 weeks in a row with a touchdown. The guy produces. He's just not a red zone threat.
I do want to answer your question, Bryce, and we'll get to it right after Chandler's here.
So, yeah, Bob, I guess long run is. I guess I'm going Cooks. I like Cooks, man. I don't know what to tell you there, man.
And that's just something, and Recon, that's just something to think about Sunday when it comes. If it's something that concerns you about Tyreek's health and Waddle's health and the whole Miami situation, and if Watson, whatever's going on there, if everything comes out, you've got to take a look at that. Let's get to Chandler's here, and then we'll get to Bryce. So we have start Josh Allen or Purdy, flex Ridley or Scary Terry, Chiefs or Chargers D. Wow.
You going first or am I?
I'll let you go first, Joe.
All right. So for me, I'm going Purdy again, all because of matchup. I don't think Arizona can stop anything, and Dallas has the chance of making that a game.
That's true.
In terms of the defenses, I already think that Washington has checked out. So I got to avoid all Commanders as much as possible. I don't love the fact that I'm playing Baltimore with Ridley, but that being said, Scary Terry's disappeared. I mean, it's been a thing here, and I don't want to rely on this. In terms of defenses, anyone that is playing against Zappy is a yes. That being said, you're giving me the unique challenge of playing the worst mustache in the NFL on Thursday Night Football at home. So that's a tough call. I'm still probably leaning the Chiefs, though, given how fired up that team was at the end of it. They're going to want to break things, and Zeke is at the end. So I know that he had his career game of the season last week. He had a great
game last week.
He did. Okay. But he, at the end of the day, I don't think he's doing that back-to-back weeks. I think that this is a very good opportunity for the Chiefs here. Ridley and Purdy would be my 3 out of those collections of questions for you there, Chandler, and that's where I'm at.
Yeah, so
you have the Rams D as well. All right, so if you're playing again Washington, this is a hard question because Chiefs New England, Rams Washington, because again, Washington's quick. This is a cross-country flight. They could get blanked. New England has the capability of never scoring. They did 3 weeks in a row without scoring. It is much more likely, I believe, the team that quits that gets buried in the off 4:00 time slot, which that Rams game is, to do that again and to just not care. I do not think that New England playing against Kansas City will be that way. And Belichick with extra time is a pain in the ass. The offense still is bad. So long story short, as much as I just hated on playing against New England, and that's who you want to play for your defense, if you can give me the Rams this week, they might be the only team that I have above the Chiefs.
So here's my plays, Chandler, and I hope this helps out here. My play is Josh Allen. Purdy against the Cardinals seems and feels like a good play, but this is easily a game where Christian McCaffrey can take over early and they just start pounding the rock with Debo, running the ball, and Jordan Mason. All these running backs that come out of the woodwork for the Niners. And Purdy is not a selfish guy. He's going to let it happen, and it's going to happen. Josh Allen, on the other hand, they need to win this game. And they need to play their asses off to win this game. And the Niners could call it at half and put in all their backups, and it won't make a difference to what happens to the 49ers other than the bye week that they want to play for. So for me, yes, Josh Allen is most likely going to throw an interception this game. It is a 75% chance that he throws an interception to Teron Bland this week. You can write it down. It's going to happen because he's going to force the ball where it doesn't need to go. But we saw that in that Seattle Dallas game that Seattle can be beat, or that Dallas can be beat over the top. And Shakir is one of those players that if you don't pay attention to him on the field as a wide receiver, that Josh Allen's going to find him.
All right, Bob, in that Dallas Buffalo game, the current projection for Orchard Park is 15 to 25 mile an hour winds with a 70% chance of rain throughout that game.
Fair enough. So
that's Buffalo.
And this is something to think about. When it comes to weather, they play at the 4 o'clock window, and the Niners also play in the 4 o'clock window. If you see that this weather, because the weather's going to change, I put a bet in on Saturday.
We know how it works.
I put a bet in on Saturday for the Jets game, which was supposed to be like downpours of rain. That did not happen. All of the unders that I bet on didn't go in. So check. Welcome back, Dees. We'll get to your question. Out of those two guys, I am more confident that Purdy will play a really good game in Arizona. But who would I want to kind of, if the weather wasn't a factor, it'd be Josh Allen. So look at the weather, check the weather. If it's raining and pouring, this game could roll through James Cook, and Josh Allen could be running a bit too. But with that said, I think Ridley's a good play this week. I don't love him, but I love him more than Scary Terry. And in terms of the defenses, Chandler, I think that I would rank these as Rams, Chargers, Chiefs. If I were to rank those in order of who I want to play, because we don't know what the Raiders are going to do. We don't know if Aiden O'Connell's going to turn out and have a good game. We don't know. And I think that the Chargers are a bad defense, but this game is probably going to be really ugly. It's probably going to be decently low scoring. So, I mean, there's going to be those points from there. So hope that helps. Bryce, are we fading Adams versus the Chargers? I played Adams this past week in the league. And he had 8 catches for 36 yards or 29 yards. If you're in a PPR league, I don't know if you really truly want to fade him, because
he's the only way they're going to move the ball. I mean, Josh Jacobs isn't playing. I get that they're going into a shell because they're afraid of having their quarterback be exposed. He is by far the most talented Raider. So when you look at this and say they need to give him the ball, so I don't think you can fade him. I think everyone in the world can know the ball is going to him. It still work. And also, do I think the Rams are a good start? Yeah, we kind of hit that head off.
Yeah, and the Rams are a good start.
Washington quit.
In my mind, I'm not fading Adams, but there are lots of better options than Devontae Adams, I believe, this week here. Let's go here to Dylan and then to Dees. Dylan, out of the 4, Watson didn't practice again, unlikely to practice Friday per the field floor. 2 running backs, 1 flex. I think that I'm still sticking with Cook, Mixon, and Reed, and I'm not putting Pollard on the field this week against Buffalo, unless that weather goes sideways in Buffalo. But
since you have both of them, I would rather have Cook than Pollard.
Yeah,
but you have to play Mixon because Minnesota's not going to do anything.
You have to play Mixon. And Dees, welcome. So pick one for the flex: A-Chain, Zamir White, OBJ, Zay Jones, and Kincaid. I don't think you can start Kincaid. With the health, with possible weather situation, and with a generally good Dallas defense, I don't think Kincaid's a start. So it comes down to these 4 players in Zay Jones, OBJ, Zamir.
I think Zamir White can really be considered in that group.
The last time The last time Joe and I bet on Zamir White to do well, he got 10, 15 yards.
Yeah. In the same situation, Josh Jacobs was out.
Yeah, in the same situation. Granted, the Chargers have a worse defense, but
And he was a rookie that year.
I'm not taking a floater on Zamir White. And Dylan, we'll get to your question for sure. Thanks for sticking around. So that leaves Achane, OBJ, and Zay Jones. And I don't love any of these options truly, but I think the one option with the highest ceiling would be Achane. He's locked in. He's locked in with Raheem Mostert. You're welcome, Dylan. He's locked in with Raheem Mostert, but Achane's still getting love. And this is a game that if it comes down to it,
Tyreek is out, they're running the ball like crazy.
And the Jets are very susceptible for the run. At the beginning of the program, we talked about how many rushing attempts the Jets have let up in the last 3 games, and it is an incredible quantity of rushing attempts. So
now where's on the team?
With that said, Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Achane are a nice triple threat that we didn't think was going to be nice at the beginning of the season, but it's turned out really well. So in my mind, Achane is the only person from this list that is worth even considering starting because those opportunities are going to be there and they're going to be really valuable opportunities.
Well, Beckham has been showing up here lately.
I
but
agree.
Achane to me is still the answer. I mean, you can't say Beckham doesn't deserve to be on that list.
No, I didn't. That's not what I said. I said that out of all of these, if you're to rank these in order, I'd go Achane, OBJ, Zay, Zamir, Kincaid.
See, I actually think I would go Beckham if Tyreek Hill plays. But if Tyreek Hill is out, I'm Achane all the way.
All right. So Dylan here asks, so we cool on Flacco. Other options just feel scary to start in playoffs. And for a tight end question, do we care that much about the opponent having Lamar with likely? No, I don't.
No.
When it comes to stuff like that, it's not if it's not too far off to play McBride. It really isn't. And when we go back to this question, the defensive special teams question, changing any of our thoughts with our last comment, your opponent having Lamar and all, I think when we think about this, Dylan, we want to win. We want to win. And so these decisions, we're going to agonize over these decisions, and we want to be able to make sure we're making the right decision. So when we go back and we look at all this, and Bryce, thanks for sticking around. We will get to your question. When we look at the what's going to be happening with the Ravens, the Jaguars don't have a really good defense. They do have a defense that can be very physical. And Allen, the D lineman is very good too. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for pass catchers. We just said about OBJ, there are going to be opportunities for pass catchers, but Lamar doesn't lock into any one particular guy like he used to with Mark Andrews. So he's going to go with whoever is open. And it is very likely, it could be very likely that Isaiah Likely goes and puts up, 20 yards. Do I think that is going to happen? No, but it has happened in the past when we wanted Likely to show up and do something. Now, McBride, on the other hand, where McBride's points are going to come are because he has been a very credible threat with Kyler Murray. This game is going to get away from the Arizona Cardinals. They're not going to be in this game for very long.
It's a 12-point spread for a reason.
They're not going to be in this game for very long. And so where I bring this Trey McBride back up again is that garbage time. We've seen him be successful in garbage time. We've seen his games. He's caught a lot of balls. He's shown up. Against the Steelers here, 8 catches, 89 yards, 7 catches, 60 yards, 5 catches, 43 yards, 8 catches, 131 yards, 3 catches, 22 yards, 10 catches, 95 yards. He's a fantastic option. Is playing against the Niners the best choice? No, but there's a good opportunity later on in that game that he could easily string together 4 catches and get 40 yards, and all of a sudden he saved his game. So that's something to consider there. Now back to the Flacco question. I'm cool with Flacco. I don't really have a problem with Flacco, but what I do have an issue with Flacco is that, he very easily could slip back into the Joe Flacco that we know is that, he could play up really well and then all of a sudden play down really, really fast. Ninjoku's a good option this week. Elijah Moore, the Bears are decent enough, but they've played nobody recently. And so when we think through this whole scenario, out of those 5, he is the least erratic quarterback that you have.
Yeah.
But his potential to boom might not be as high as one of those guys. He is fairly safe, I would say, with a 2 touchdown floor, maybe an interception here, but he's not going to run the ball. He's not going to get any of those extra things. So he's just a thrower, right? He's just a quarterback. So you're not getting any of that bonus stuff that those other quarterbacks might provide to you.
Yeah. I personally lean Levis, but I can get why you go with Flacco.
And Bryce here. So do you think there's a better option? I got Schultz, Hubbard, or Jones. Let's go back to your original question here with Adams. Who do we think is? Do you mean who do we think is the better option from these guys, or who do we think it might be a better option than Devontae Adams? Because I'm starting Devontae Adams over all those guys.
Yeah, that's already close.
That's kind
of. And if Jones is healthy, he goes second.
Yeah, and all in all, to think about this here is when we look at guys like Schultz and Hubbard and Jones, and we say to ourselves, okay, where's the value at? Well, we've seen Hubbard do some weird things. He's not a fantastic player by any stretch of the imagination, but he hasn't been as bad as
them over Adams is the question, Bryce. The answer is Adams.
Yeah, I think it has to be Adams because the Carolina Panthers, like we said, are not a good team. And their garbage time is not garbage time that aligns to Hubbard. And so when you look at what's going to happen in this game against the Falcons, the only way they stay in this game is if they can move the ball down the field. If Aaron Jones is healthy, Bryce, which I don't think he's going to be this week, I think he's a good flex against the Buccaneers, but the Buccaneers do have a pretty strong run defense, and because of that, they are more susceptible to getting thrown on. But Aaron Jones is a good pass catcher too, so I think Jones is a good option there. And with Amari, I mean, with Flacco,
he's not going to Amari. Amari's also getting cold and not showing up.
He's not going to Amari, and this is the thing where I am not comfortable with Amari Cooper. If Jones is playing, I'm starting Jones. If not, Amari Cooper would have to be the guy. But I would Adams is definitely the guy over Chuba and Schultz in my mind. No matter what happens, he's gonna get targets. If we go back and we look at Devontae Adams over the last several weeks, and again, Bryce, when we talk about is this good for PPR or not PPR, in PPR leagues, Adams has been pulling together some really good games recently. 7 for 53, no touchdown, but still that's above 10 points. 5 for 73, so the same stat line against the Chiefs in terms of points that you're getting for fantasy purposes. And then against the Dolphins, he went 7 for 82 and a touchdown. So the possibility is there. They're going to get the opportunities because the Chargers are not going to be able to stay on the field unless they just trot out Josh Kelly and Eckler. But those two backs are not good runners. They are good all-purpose kind of players. But they're not electric runners. They're not going to move the ball. They're not going to move the chains a lot unless Easton Stick has a good game, which is a possibility. I don't see it, though. So Dylan, to the point, Raiders. I think the Raiders are an option here that with Easton Stick, with this, I think that it's good to wait on the tight end dilemma. Don't ruin your Thursday, don't ruin your Friday thinking about which tight end to play. McBride for the garbage time is, and Hope for the receptions is a great play. If it likely ends up getting the touchdowns, then, you're taking points, you're negating those points from Lamar Jackson. So it's definitely something to think about. But in terms of the defense, Joe loves the Ravens.
I
So
do.
they have like we said, the Ravens have a good enough matchup. Trevor Lawrence throws interceptions. The Ravens have people that can run that ball back for a touchdown. They are a number 1 team in the division for a reason. They are an elite level team this year, all said and done.
Yes,
Do they have issues? Yes, they absolutely have issues. Do the Jaguars have issues? 100% the Jaguars have issues. And Trevor Lawrence is going to be pinging this ball down the field in this game because they need to win. So if you don't want to play the Raiders tonight, Dylan, you're going to get an equally as good defense in the Ravens. Where tonight comes into play is the Ravens are not going to be able to stop the Jaguars from completely scoring. So the Jaguars will put up points. So if you get more points from having a lower total score, I think that the Raiders are the better play because the Raiders don't cause a lot. Like we said, the Raiders turnover differential is interesting here with them not having a run game. And, you know, Aiden O'Connell's going to have to pass his way down the field. We saw how well and how not well that worked in that Minnesota game. There were a lot of punts in that game, low scoring. I just want to take a look how many points
I just go with the emphasis of sacks. And yes, the Chargers don't have a great offensive line, but Baltimore's leading the league in sacks for a reason.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't get past that fact, Bob. I just
can't get past that fact. And that's fair. And that's fair enough to say when you look at it.
Also, do you really want to watch tonight's game? I mean, just being totally blunt.
I don't. But the Raiders had 5 sacks last week against Dobbs and whatever quarterback they were
Mullins. Yeah.
Dylan, I might do Ravens. Opponent has I mean, playing the Ravens defense might help you out because if the Ravens run more too, you would be hurting the opponent there. You can see the Raiders putting a turnover near the end zone, and the Chargers scoring a quick 3 or 7. Yeah,
I mean, both are road teams, so
that is a very likely thing to happen as well, Dylan. And this is why it's strange to agonize over a defensive question.
It's the playoffs.
But this is the playoffs. And with the defense in here of the Raiders, the Raiders are very likely to turn over the ball themselves and then go into a short field. The Ravens, the Ravens aren't probably going to turn over the ball in short field situations. So that benefits the Ravens defense as an overall thing. So like I said, I like the Raiders. I think the Raiders are going to have a good enough game this week that's going to be good for fantasy purposes. But like Joe said, the Ravens are an incredible, solid option against a very pass-happy team and a rush-heavy team. But, fumbles, turnovers, those are a thing that the Jaguars do a lot. So taking that all into consideration, making sure you don't have to watch tonight's game at all.
It's also a fact.
That
That being said, Bob, we've had this happen a couple of times this year with gross and dirty games to being one of the bets of the day, of the weekend rather. Tonight's has one of them. And to put a finer point on it, the over-under on tonight's game is 34.5. Incredibly low number. I projected being in the over. I projected there being at least 35 scored tonight, probably closer to 40 when it's all said and done.
That's disgusting. I know. I hate your metric. I hate that. That's disgusting.
I know, but that's the official money bet here. And I'll just run through the other ones while we're a little bit along in the questions. But the first one is Chargers Vegas over 34.5. The next one being Cleveland Chicago over 38. Next one being the New York Jets going to Miami plus 8.5.
It doesn't.
And then the final one being that Hotlanta Funk -3 at Carolina.
So Dylan, that doesn't change it. It really doesn't. I mean, regardless of if your opponent's starting the Chargers defense tonight, it doesn't change the fact that the Ravens are a really good team. I see it is, and I think that's fair. And I think you don't have to, like Joe said, the computer models that we have are spitting out that this game is going to go over.
Mhm.
I don't see that personally because of what we saw last week.
Well,
But
over on a 34.5 point spread. It's an incredibly low number.
it is an incredibly low number, and a lot of the games last week that were low numbers went over.
And part of the reason is that I don't believe Herbert was worth 8 points in terms of the deduction of it.
Yeah.
Herbert's been playing bad football for a while. It's going to be one of the overseen things whenever we get in the next year. I do think Herbert might be the most overrated player drafted in next year's draft because of the name recognition. I'm calling that now. So
Whoa,
that's the thing.
Bowsers.
People will give him the benefit of the doubt because of what they believe he could be. He was not good this year, and he really wasn't that great the year before, battling through all those injuries.
Yeah.
Despite he battled through those injuries, I guess it's
So,
way to say that.
Everybody, we hope that helped. Dylan, good luck. George, good luck. Everybody that joined us, good luck today. Hopefully,
And all you guys were
hopefully
regulars,
everybody
and
next
y'all made
round.
the playoffs. Love that about you guys.
It is good to hear that we have some playoff teams in here. Joe and I ourselves are in some playoff matchups in a couple of leagues. I have my bye this week, so I am coasting on that regards.
I'm in wild card weekend. 3C has
really
to
good.
play.
Feels really good because I got a couple Philadelphia wide receivers and some injuries to clear up. So good luck to everybody in your playoffs. We'll be back next week, and hopefully we'll be back to some winners.